So, I'm sure looking at this footage, you are asking yourself, who is this guy and why is he being brutalized this way? I'm going to get into it, but I promise you, this case is a perfect example of the saying that says that pride goes before the fall, he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword, and karma comes around full circle. Now, the guy you see being manhandled is a guy called Kwame Ato Asare, and this is a case that is coming from my own country, Ghana. This guy has a track record of brutalizing even security agencies, including the police, and in some instances, even a military commander who had come to apprehend him in the course of him either committing a crime or having committed a crime. He has been to the police station under arrest. He has gone to court and come out of court on bail to brutalize his uncle for testifying against him. And there's a whole rap sheet to this guy. And I'm going to take my time and break it down from the genesis of his come up right down to this final showdown where you see him being treated in this fashion in the footage that started in this episode. This is a true crime story that is almost as though it's a script of a movie. But I tell you, this is a true story coming out of Ghana in West Africa, my own country, and it is a trending case that is still building. Yeah, one life has been lost out of this instance, and we are going to get into that as well. So please, just buckle up and take this in. So, this Kwame Ato Asare guy was actually unknown to the general public, but he came to light about 2 years ago when a video started circulating on social media which shows Kwame Ato Asare and his gang of thugs brutalizing a handful of police officers. Now, investigations started circling around this case, and it would be found out that Kwame Ato Asare and his gang were alleged to be engaged in Galamsey. In case you are not familiar with what Galamsey is a term, a native term that has been coined and references illegal mining here in Ghana. And Kwame Ato Asare and his cohorts are alleged to be engaged in this Galamsey, and they were doing it somewhere at the western part of the country, allegedly, and were alleged to have gotten so huge in that business because there's money in it if you're able to be successful in applying that illegal mining trade. And they had been successful in it, gotten the gold, sold it, so they had money to finance their thug lifestyle. And they were able to buy people to join their gang, obtain ammunitions to fund the brutality of what they stood for, and had even gone further, allegedly, to compromise some of the security officers, which, according to Kwame Ato Asare's own testimony, after that video surfaced, he went on to even talk about the fact that those police officers who were seen being manhandled by him and his gang in that trending viral footage were actually police officers who were on his payroll, and that he works with them. Now, these are the same police officers the state, in trying to combat illegal mining in Ghana, would send to the illegal mining sites to go and apprehend the illegal miners, like Kwame Ato Asare and his gang. So it seemed like the whole thing was +1 - 1. The government sends them. Kwame Ato and his gang have already compromised them financially and just pays them off and they leave. But on this particular incident, it seems there was a misunderstanding between them, and according to the testimony of Kwame Ato Asare, he had actually bribed these police officers because he works with them. They came to pick him up and he bribed them. So they were supposed to drop him off at a point on the route back from his Galamsey site, so he goes his way. But after he had bribed them, they were still continuing as though they were taking him all the way to the police station, to which he was able to get a message of distress out to his gang, and they barricaded the road, and the ensuing outcome was what we saw in the footage, where they were now physically manhandling police officers in uniform. Now, I don't condone that, but you'd also begin to understand why they will get to that low level of the police officers, because allegedly they've compromised them financially. So this was the first instance that actually shot Kwame Ato and his gang to fame. And we in Ghana got to know of this gang leader called Kwame Ato Asare. It didn't end there. Kwame Ato Asare would come up later on in social media under various circumstances, now trying to talk about the fact that he is actually linked to some deities and spiritual lesser gods here in Ghana and even in some African countries, and that he is very fortified spiritually and he can't be defeated as a person because he has some spiritual backing on his side. Before you start debunking these things, let me let you know it's called black magic. I'm sure you may have heard of it. It's called black magic, where some people resort to obtaining alleged powers from some spiritual traditionalists who claim that they can fortify them against things like gunshots, stab wounds, and any other thing that may harm their physical being, and also fortify them against spiritual attack. And before you debunk these things, I must tell you, there are people who actually believe in this, and there are a bit, dare I say, a bit of evidence or semblances of evidence that seek to corroborate that these things work in some instances. Now, this is just to give you a brief view or overview of who Kwame Ato is and what he was doing. And guess what? It doesn't end there, because even when he did that to the police officers, he was shot to fame because of that video, but it also put him on the radar of the police, and he became one of the most wanted people in the country because of what he was doing to the police. And he had to escape out of the country to one of the African countries, but he came back when he thought the heat was down, and eventually he was arrested by the police. Now, when he was arrested, he was taken to court, and his uncle, who is a very respected person in the town that Kwame Ato Asare and his gang operates, actually is reported to have testified against him. This didn't go down well with Kwame Ato because he felt his uncle had betrayed him, but he kept quiet. Now, he was released on bail, and guess what he did? As soon as he got free after being released on bail, the first thing that Kwame Ato Asare did was to go find that uncle of his, and he put his hands on him so much and drastically to the point his uncle needed intense medical attention. On that, he was arrested again, but he was still released on bail pending his case being heard in court, as the court process was still ongoing. So one would think that then Kwame Asare would actually sit and take stock of his life and change his ways. But guess what? He didn't. It seems this guy had tasted power, and it has gotten to his head, because look at how he was manhandling the police officers. They were kneeling down and begging him. He was able to get them out of their official police vehicle, turn off the engine, and take out the keys to the vehicle and commandeer the vehicle that he seized it. He was able to get one of them to take off his uniform and kneel down and beg him. And they were even putting hands on these police officers. Look at this guy. And imagine the extent of power he would have to have and hold and command to be able to do that to police officers. And that's what he was doing. So I think he became power drunk. And it didn't end there. In another footage that would come up later, you would see Kwame Ato Asare and his gang again, this time confronting not just police officers, but an alleged military commander who had been sent from the capital city of Accra to that western part of the country to restore order with regards to illegal mining. And you would see that at a point in time in the video, this so-called alleged military commander was being spoken down to by Kwame Ato and his gang. They were even passing threats in subtle comments and even telling him that he's nobody and he has to put his hands down when he's talking to them. They would go further ahead to even strip him of his shirt and realize that he had some local charms around him, and they cut it off and dared him to challenge them with regards to their spiritual charms they had on them, and that his was inferior. This comes back to the point I was highlighting, that this guy had fallen on seeking spiritual protection from shrines and deities and felt that he was invincible and untouchable. But guess what? Everybody is touchable. Some get touched early, some get touched late, some get touched almost every time, but everybody is touchable. Kwame Ato felt that he wasn't touchable. He was doing this to prominent people in the security service, and he had a gang of thugs around him, and these guys were barely in their 20s. Barely in their 20s. He could go to Galamsey sites of his rivals and just vandalize the place. Now, in that regard, someone will say, oh, then he's helping combat illegal mining. Technically, you would say that, but the other flip side is it's actually breeding violence, because there are retaliatory attacks as well. Now, all this was pertaining, and it brought us into 2025. At this time, this is about 2 years after Kwame Ato had done all these things to the police, and he had gotten to that point where he had evolved into a household name with regards to the top thugs and bandits at the western part of the country, who had now become very feared and famous. He was one of the top shotters of his town at this time. Now, a rival gang came to town, and they were trying to set up shop, and there was a clash between Kwame and his gang and this rival gang, and Kwame and his gang actually put out a hell of a beating on this gang and overpowered them, and they literally brutalized them to the point they had to flee. Now, when they fled, they went to their leaders as a gang and told them what had happened. Now, their leaders also sat back and decided to retaliate. And this is how come the violence increases, because it becomes a matter of cause and effect, such that for whatever is done to them, they try to get back and do it in 1,000-fold. So Kwame Ato Asare and his gang felt that, oh, they were done with this rival gang. Little did they know that this rival gang were also planning a retaliation. Now, fast forward. This rival gang, led by a guy called Al-Hassan, went to Kwame Ato Asare's illegal mining site in his absence and vandalized the place. Now, if you are familiar with illegal mining, you would know that getting the apparatus or the equipment to fund or to pursue this illegal mining is very expensive, especially for somebody like Kwame Ato Asare, who is just an individual trying to make ends meet by engaging in small-scale mining. So it hit him hard. It hit him financially, and he knew that it was this rival gang who did this, but they couldn't get to them. So at this point in time, it became a beef between them, where Kwame Ato Asare and his gang were now bent on getting back at Hassan and his gang for what they've done to them in terms of vandalizing their illegal mining operation. And you'd see that he felt it's going to be one of those days. He actually came on social media and issued threats to this guy, talking to him and telling him that he has some spiritual powers and that he's going to meet him and show him who is the kingpin at that location. He put this video out, or this threat, he put it out as a video on social media, on TikTok, with his gang behind him. And they were all throwing shots, throwing verbal, whatever, and fueling what they were going to do. But you see, I always say that talk is cheap. But in that same vein, there are also some people who talk, but they don't just talk. They say exactly what they are going to do and they don't back down on it. Now, Kwame Ato Asare, at a point in issuing out his warning, even went ahead to tell this so-called opponent of his that when he meets him, he's going to make sure that he handles him to a point where he would become so overcome with grief, pain, and he will be overwhelmed by the force they will bring on him and unleash on him that he wouldn't even be able to hold himself and may actually desecrate himself. This was what he said. So the battle lines were drawn. Now fast forward. Kwame Ato Asare and his gang, comprising of him, his brother, and 2 other people, would go to his shrine and post a video of it in the company of other people, talking about how powerful his deity is and that he has been fortified by this deity, and if you trouble him and he mentions your name to the deity, you are doomed. This is the kind of life this guy was living, and he had so much confidence in this deity of his. He was ready to go and face his opponent under the protection of this deity because he felt he was spiritually fortified. Now, on the fateful day, Kwame Ato, his brother, his younger brother that is, and 2 other members of his gang, adding up to 4, went out to find his opponent Hassan and his gang to show them who is the man at that location. Now they found them. According to reports, it's alleged they found them. They found a few of them and started putting hands on them. Now it seemed like they were actually getting the upper hand over Hassan and his gang, only for reinforcements to come in from Hassan and his gang, at which point it's reported they were now outnumbered 9-4. And Hassan and his gang apparently had firearms, and one person started letting off some shots. And this is where the powers of the deity were put to the test. Trust you me, although unconfirmed, it is being alleged that when shots were fired at Kwame Ato Asare, it didn't penetrate because he had on that red smoke or that red outfit, and it's been alleged that it was spiritually fortified. But then it's been alleged again that Hassan's gang member who had the firearm took aim at Kwame Ato's younger brother and unalived him, at which point the other 2 gang members of his fled. And so it was left with just Kwame Ato Asare and his deceased brother. And when he saw his brother was deceased, he just fell into shock. At which time the rival gang caught up with him, and then it brought us to the video you were watching from the beginning, where they would then go on to overpower him and put hands on him to a point that is so humiliating. I just can't show it in this video. But basically, they overpowered him and they just messed him up. they didn't unalive him, but they messed him up to the point that he actually soiled himself from the back. And they took off everything on him, including his charms, put hands on him, and then abandoned him. And they were doing all this whilst covering it with a camera and a phone. Now, when they left, the same residents of the town who have previously been terrorized by Kwame Ato Asare were the same people who came around to cover him up and whisk him away to the hospital. Now, at the hospital, Kwame Ato Asare, the once dangerous thug lord, leader of a gangster group who had refused to let peace reign, was now crying and saying that he has lost all his powers because his brother was unalived. And like I said, everybody can be touched. Everybody has a weak point. That has been proven over the years, that everybody has a weak point. And I guess his brother was his weak point, or maybe the deity itself failed. But I was asking myself, if he had all those fortifications, why didn't he also extend some to his brother? Yeah, why didn't he extend some to his brother? It would only make sense that if you are carrying your brother to battle against your ops, you better make sure he's as fortified as you. Unless in all his thuggery, he wasn't that wise to think to that extent, or maybe his brother actually had some form of fortification, but it failed because maybe it was nothing at the end of the day. Or maybe it failed in comparison to that of the other gang because they also had theirs. And this is where the whole thing gets tricky, because you would think that, oh, then this is the end of this gang leader and his group and it solves it. But no, it doesn't. Because now the tide has shifted to the other side of this Al Hassan and his gang, who would then be parading themselves as the new guys on the block, the new guys people should fear, the new guys who probably try to take over the territory that were being controlled by Kwame Ato Asare and his gang, because now he has defeated him. And imagine the terror they are also going to bring. And also imagine if Kwame Ato Asare and his gang, or even his gang alone, decide to come back and retaliate, because a video has surfaced since this happened, purportedly coming from the remaining members of Kwame Ato's gang, who are saying they are going to come back for retribution. But I ask myself, do they even have that level of loyalty at all? Because if they did, those two gang members who were with him when the conflict broke wouldn't have run. They would have stood their ground and helped him as their leader. But they turned heels and they ran. But some way, somehow, this gang still believes that there's loyalty and they are going to come back. And maybe they will. Because there's still a saying that he who fights and runs lives to fight another day. So, well, you can't blame them. I have personally seen a man walking the streets of Accra here in Ghana who was said to be insane, actually try to avoid a vehicle knocking him down whilst crossing the road. So even at that level, there's some sort of sanity that is enough to foster self-preservation. So I can't fault them. But this is the genesis and the revelation on this case. As it stands now, Kwame Ato Asare is actually at the hospital and he's been badly brutalized and hurt. So much so, his recovery may take so long. Now, it brings into sharp focus the saying that pride comes before the fall. Because this guy seems so high and mighty and untouchable, you would be wondering what could take him down. In the face of the police, he was nonchalant, he was aggressive, he was actually subduing them. In the face of the police in the company of an alleged military commander, he was still doing same. And even in the face of the courts, he remained unrepentant even when his case was ongoing, and came back home after being released on bail to come and put hands on his uncle for testifying against him on his case. This shows you the unrepentant spirit that this guy had. Little did anybody know that it was going to take a confrontation between himself and another gang to bring him down. Not the best form of justice, not justice at all, if you ask me. But the Bible says it. If you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Fortunately, he is not dead, but then he has lost his brother too. And that is another thing altogether. At this point, you wonder what will be going on in their family with regards to their parents having lost a kid to this. And the way Kwame Ato Asare was mourning the loss of his brother whilst he was at the hospital and screaming his name out and talking about the fact that he lost all his powers after his brother was unalived, and that he doesn't even want to continue in life anymore because his brother has been unalived. I ask myself, what are some of the things he felt was going to happen by exposing himself to that life? Because it begins to show you how possibly delusional this guy was, thinking that he is always going to do this and ride off into the sunset and there will be no casualty, there will be no damage, there will be no accountability. He's just going to push people around, bully people. It's interesting, and I think that maybe he didn't really even have anything at all, because he met people who were like him. If he was that superior in his deity worship and all the things he claimed he had, that was the best time for him to prove it. And I wouldn't be surprised that those same people who have even overpowered him may not have all they say they have. They might not be all they say they are, or they may be more than that. You never know. But I'm expecting that the police service and the security agencies will step in, because all these things depict a culture of callousness and breakdown of law at this part of the country. Imagine these shots being fired and civilians may be walking around. Somebody could catch a stray bullet, and what happens if a life is damaged or affected by that? You just hear sorry, apologies to the family, but you can't go back in time and change what has happened. Proactivity and prevention is always the best, and I'm expecting that there should be more action on this from the security agencies, and all the culpable people should be brought to book. And this wouldn't be easy to fully eliminate, but I think that the police are capable of getting this resolved, and I think that it also wouldn't be that difficult to prosecute, because in the videos that are circulating, it's easy to pick some of the suspects, and once they are gotten into the grips of the police, I'm sure they will help get all the rest who are not showing in the video. What do you think about this case? Let me know in the comment section. But hey, nothing lives forever, and power is not forever. Watch yourself wherever you are. Don't think you're untouchable. Be fair to people, have empathy, and do right by everybody, whether they are strong or weak. I'll catch you on the next one. Stay safe.